Hello and welcome to the chesscreator.com YouTube video channel. In today's video I would like to briefly run through a bullet tournament game that I played recently. The reason I've chosen this is because it touches upon my version of the exchange French, playing Queen d5, looking to fianchetto the light square bishop, etc. Castle long, but also because it was just one of those crazy games where I won and lost the game several times from start to finish. So even though it was only a 2-minute game, it was pretty exciting, and I think it demonstrates how it's possible to win, lose, and then win and lose, and then win the game again, finally. So I hope you find this entertaining. I did, and here goes. So it was a standard French defense opening. e4, e6, d4, d5, and here I'm pretty happy with either of White's main options. If they play the Tarrasch or knight c3, inviting the winner, I just capture the pawn and go to the Rubinstein variation, and the advance variation is fine also. I just play c5 with an early queen b6, and that's good fun. But here White chooses what could be a very dull variation, which is the exchange variation, but I try and spice things up by playing queen d5. White pushes the queen back, and I retreat the queen, and as I said, look to fianchetto the light square bishop. So game continues with fianchetto the bishop, and White plays a forcing move here. This is fine because at this stage my general plan is still to castle long, so I'm looking to play c6, queen c7, that kind of thing. But here I'm forced to play knight f6, and kind of surprisingly White captures. And at this point I get a sneaking suspicion that White is intending to castle queenside. So I prepare a nasty trap if that happens, as follows. After queen d2, I'm pretty certain White intends to castle long, and so I lay a trap here by playing bishop d6, noting that if White castles long, I'll be able to skewer the white queen, and this actually happens as follows. White castles long, I play bishop f4, and at this point I've skewered the white queen. So at this point in a 2-minute game up against an opponent a couple of 100 points higher than myself, I'm pretty happy, but is often the case when you go ahead in the game, it can be just the point where you make a horrible blunder, and this actually happens. So I capture the queen, and then I do what most of us would do, which is just seek to exchange pieces. So I exchange the knight, and at this point I just miss that the light square bishop is targeting my a7 rook, and so I go from being clearly ahead in the game in a matter of moves. I've managed to pretty much help White almost equalise. It's now 2 rooks, a knight, and a bishop against queen, rook, and knight. Number of pawns is equal, but this is by no means an easy game, particularly as I was down on the clock at this point. So I was furious with myself at this point for basically giving a rook away for nothing. But I decided to continue, and I just decided to try and concentrate on one thing, which was limiting a little bit of white's counterplay, and also looking to try and exchange off a pair of rooks. It can be difficult, 2 rooks against a queen, but queen against a rook, that's a different ball game. So my basic plan was to try and play defensively and solidly for a few moves, and look and wait for white to present a weakness. It's a little bit of a challenge for white to coordinate his pieces, but he does a pretty good job for the next 20 moves or so before I finally managed to break through. So here's how the game progressed. He's now looking to get rid of my pesky knight, which I seek to try and preserve, and white retreats the knight, bishop f3. I then play rook d8, and I'm expecting white to double up, but I'm looking for an opportunity to swap off a pair of rooks. So white indeed plays rook d1, and I play c5. Again, as I said, I'm looking to exchange a pair of rooks. White is probably very well aware of that, and pushes the pawn. I exchange the pawn, play a disruptive check, and here white coordinates a nice defense with bishop e4, pushing the queen back. He then really uses the light square bishop in quite a strong defensive way, protecting this diagonal and also really creating something of a fortress along this diagonal. So I look to create a temporary blockade to stop this pawn from being problematic, and he starts a kingside pawn storm. So at this point my plan changes, and I decide that I need to get these pawns working. Really, I need to open up the king side and try and cause white some problems. At this stage of the game I feel as if I'm on the defensive, and I need to cause white some problems. So the game continued with knight b5, queen d7, threatening the knight, and here the knight retreats. I then begin my own pawn storm. The knight retreats, and I push my pawn forward to b4. White continues to reroute his knight, some kind of attack, and I continue just applying pressure. At this point he tries to rip open the king side, but I just temporarily delay that by playing g5 to kick the knight, and the knight retreats to quite a passive position, and I then play a4. And at this point I'm starting to feel happier about my position. I'm willing to sacrifice 1 or 2 of these pawns to rip open the king position, and the game continues as follows. Rook d4, c3, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, check. And at this point I feel that I'm starting to claw my way back into the game. I have white's king position exposed, and this allows me an opportunity for some counterplay. So king c2, rook c8, and here I'm looking to try and cause white some problems. White's been playing quite aggressively and I've been playing very defensively. Here I try and pin the knight, and with one eye on this a pawn, trying to use it as an outpost for the queen, pushing it to a3. looking forward to being able to play Queen b2 perhaps. So white plays Rook b1, and I double on the c file, pressurizing this knight, and white defends that position. So at this point I try and turn up the pressure a little bit and also protect the a pawn. As I said, I have plans for the a pawn. And white looks to consolidate his king position, basically surrounding it with pieces. Now at this point his bishop is not in a great position because it's occupying too much of a defensive role. So I bring my knight into the action, intending b4 check to win the exchange. White spots that, moves his king out of the way, and I play b4 anyway, just trying to apply pressure. And at this point I think white was forced into quite an unfortunate move. White sacks the exchange to relieve some of the pressure, but at this point I get my goal. If you remember, earlier on in the game I mentioned that my goal was to get one pair of rooks off, and therefore it's now rook, bishop and knight against rook and queen, and I feel that I'm in the ascendancy again. So the knight's pinned at the moment, and I play a3. As I said, I'm looking to use the pawn as an outpost for the queen. White tries to run, and I play queen b2 check, and at this point the game is swinging in my favour, but white decides to play on. I capture the knight, capture the rook, and at this point it's queen against bishop, and it's clearly game over, but my opponent decides to play on, and that gives me an opportunity for quite a pretty mate, I think, anyway. So the game continues. King f2, queen b2 check, king g3, queen takes a2, d6, queen d2, just to stop any hope of this pawn promoting, d7, desperation, and here I decide to push my own pawn, f4, and I queen. White is now playing desperate moves. I snap off the pawn, give a final check, queen d6 check, and this is the quite cute finish which I actually calculate and see. I play pawn takes g5 check, and after king takes I play queen f6 checkmate. So quite an instructive game there in some ways, in terms of not throwing the game away, but also managing to fight back after making a horrible blunder, being a piece up to go almost a piece down, and then basically regrouping, coming up with a plan, and being patient and breaking through white's defences. So I hope that's been useful. If it has, please feel free to subscribe or favourite or like the video. All those options are free. And in the meantime, I wish you all the well, and leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much for your time.